so into literature assessments are going to provide you with the data that you need to teach targeted lessons and to accelerate your student growth. So before we get into talking specifically about the into literature assessments, let's just talk briefly about assessments in general. Let's think about why we give assessments. So what is the point? So the point of assessments is to drive our instruction so we can see what students need to work on. So into literature is going to provide feedback loops for the teacher so you can drive your instruction, so you can plan, so you can intervene when students need it. And it's also going to provide them for the students to help teach self-assessment and reflection, and so students become invested in their own learning. And both of those things are going to lead to student growth, which is the goal. So there are three major types of assessments into literature, and we're going to briefly talk about the three of them. You can also find them on PLG pages 64 through 65. Now, the first one is the adaptive growth measure, and you're going to give this one 3 times a year. So the scores in the growth measure are going to show as Lexile measures, and these are to give you an idea of where your students are on their learning continuum. So the first time you give the growth measure is at the beginning of the year, and it serves as a pretest to give you a baseline for student knowledge. And then you give it 2 more times in order to see growth. Into literature also includes unit assessments. Now, there are 6 unit assessments. Now, you might not necessarily teach all 6 units of into literature in the year. So you may not give all 6, but for each of the units that you teach, there will be a unit assessment. And then there are also ongoing feedback assessments or formative assessments. And these assessments are going to be a variety of daily activities that students complete. And the data will be collected to help you drive your instruction and to target what needs to be taught to your students and to provide intervention when necessary. Now, if you look at pages 64 through 67 in your PLG, and go ahead and mark those pages, and after you've taught your first unit of Into Literature, and you've become a little bit more comfortable with the program, you can go back to these pages to do some more in-depth learning about all of the assessments that are available to you in Into Literature. We're not going to go over all of them today, but we are going to go over 3 major ones, or basic ones, that you would use right away as soon as you start teaching Into Literature. So the 3 that we're just going to briefly review is the growth measure, which we kind of already talked about, the selection tests, and the unit tests. So the growth measure is again going to be that test that you give first. You're going to give it at the beginning of the unit, at the beginning of the year before you even start, and it's going to provide you with some baseline data for your students. And again, it's essentially a pretest, and this gives you somewhere to build with your students. It's going to give you their Lexile score, so it's also going to help you identify what text they can read and the ones they may need a little bit more assistance with. And then it'll also help you help them pick their books for independent reading. The selection tests are going to be available in print or online, and they are going to basically measure how students are doing along the way during the unit. So you can assign them online, or you can print them out and give them to students and kind of get an idea of where students are. And then you have the unit tests, which are going to obviously assess at the end of the unit, and then it's going to assess how did the students master the skills of that unit and give you good data for what may possibly need to be retaught. Does anybody have any questions about these 3 assessments to start with? Okay, great. Let's keep going. All right, so I'm going to go away from the PowerPoint for a minute and go on to Ed. Since y'all have already been on Ed in this training, if you want to kind of follow along with me, you can. And I'm going to show you how to assign an online assignment to students. we're just going to click on over to Ed. There we go. And I'm going to scroll down and then see under resources, you're going to see a little bit further. Well, there it is. Assessment. Sorry. So you're going to see assessment. And when you first log in, you just kind of have a list of assessments. You can use the screen on the left to narrow it down if you want to. So for example, if you know that you're on Unit 4, you can go ahead and click Unit 4 and it'll give you the Unit 4 assessments. So you see first you have a printable version. Down here, you see this button, Assign, and it'll bring you up to this window. Now, the title populates automatically. You can change it though. So you could type in Test 1, Test 2, whatever it is you want to use. You need your start date and your due date, and then you can assign it to students or by groups. And I don't have any groups, so I would have to do mine by students. And then you can type in directions for your students if you want to. Then you'll click Assign, and it's assigned. Now, you also have the option to print assessments if you want to. So you could open this assessment and print it, and then that way your students could have a hard copy if that's what you prefer. Now, the benefit to assigning them online is, of course, that they will be graded online. So if you want to kind of lessen the load for yourself and not have to do so much grading, then that's a great feature of the online assessments and activities that you can have them graded. Now, there are open response questions and assessments, and obviously the program can't grade those for you, but you will get a notification when you have those type of questions to grade. And Into Literature does provide a rubric for those types of questions, so you can grade it as you follow along with the rubric. You can also customize your tests to not include open response questions if you want to. So you have a lot of options with the online testing feature or assessment feature. All right, does anybody have any questions about assessments before we go on to reports? So we're going to talk about how you access the data from the assessments. Okay, great. So we're going to take a look at reports. Well, we're actually going to take a look at one report. If you look on pages 68 and 69 of your PLG, so go ahead and mark those pages right now. Those pages will explain all the reports that are available to you in Into Literature. Now, we are only going to look at one report today. I don't want to overwhelm you with a ton of reports, and you don't necessarily need to know every report right from the beginning. So you have that option to go back and look at it. And then there are also Ed modules on assessments and reports that you can access at any time during the year. So once you've gotten a little comfortable with Into Literature and you want to dive a little deeper, don't forget to go on to Ed and access those modules. So the report that we're going to look at is the assessment report. And if you turn to pages 70 and 71 of your PLG, you'll see that there is a sample report in there for you to look at. Now, we're going to look at each of the features of the assessment report up here on the board. So first, if you look up here, and it looks really tiny on the screen, but it says Class 1. So you have this drop-down menu with the option to switch between your classes that you have in the program. And then if you come down here, there are two tabs right here. So there's the assessment report and the standards report, and you can toggle between the two of those. If you take a look right here at the assessment proficiency box, you have the ability to look at your students' cumulative scores. So they are color-coded based on their success. So you probably can't see because it's so small, but the green is 80 to 100%, the yellow is 65 to 79, and the red is 0 to 64. And then if you see gray, that means you have students with no data or students who haven't taken any assessments. Now, if you want to see the individual scores within this category, then you can just click and it'll show you the individual scores between each of those. Right here, you can export to a CSV, so if you need to export that data, you can just click that button and have access to that. Right here is the assessment average for all of your students. So this shows the average on each of the assessments that you've given so far. And then you can click the individual assessment, and there's this blue C report. If you click that C report, it will give you all of the summative data for that particular assessment. Now, right down here is the assessment performance piece, and we'll get a little closer look at that. This is where you're going to get all of your very high-level informative data on students' scores. So you can see right here that this is a toolbar that has all of your tests, and you can look at them individually. So you can click See Report for those tests individually, but you can see the scores here for your students. And then right here, you can see their average on your assessment so far. Now, just like the assessment proficiency box, they're color-coded. So you can get a quick overview of how your students are doing on assessments. And then if you look at the individual tests, you can get a quick overview of how they did on that particular test with those little colored dots that mean the same thing. So again, green is 80 to 100, yellow is 65 to 79, and red is 0 to 64. And then we have this student right here, Stacy, who has no data. So she hasn't taken any of the tests, so she's got a gray box. Does anybody have any questions about this particular report? This is going to be your go-to report, particularly at first. It's really going to give you the data that you want to, say, put in PowerSchool, and it's going to give it to you really quickly. You're going to be able to see an average. You're going to be able to see how your students did overall and individually. Okay, so we're going to take a minute to reflect. What I want you to do is just jot down the end of this sentence for you. So take 1 minute to quietly write down, I will use data from the assessment report to, and fill in that blank, and when a minute's up, we'll share and discuss a little bit. Okay, great job. So if y'all would just share at your tables what you wrote, and I'm going to kind of walk around and eavesdrop a little bit, and then we'll discuss as a big group what we can do with this assessment report. Okay, I heard some really great conversations and a bunch of wonderful ideas about how to use this assessment report. So we're just going to briefly review some of the main aspects of the assessment report, the main uses, I guess, of the assessment report. First of all, you can use the assessment report to group your students. So you can group them based on their ability level. If you were, say, doing test corrections in groups, you could group them based on how they did on the test. You can help students select their correct text for their independent reading. You can use this report for conferencing. You can use it for lesson planning, particularly if you need to reteach a certain topic from a certain unit. You can use it to determine proficiency, so you can extend learning. So if you have an area where all students really got it and you want to go a little bit further, or if you want to identify that area as something that you don't maybe have to review as much when you get to EOC time or end of like your exam time, you can use it to assign interactive lesson plans through HMH Studios. So the studios can be assigned to particular students who need intervention or a little bit of extra help. Does anybody have any questions about the assessment report? Okay, just as a reminder, if you want to look at pages 72 to 73 in your PLG, It has the manageable milestones and the extend your professional learning in terms of assessments and reports. Now again, also remember you can log into Ed and access those getting started modules or the professional learning modules at any point. So when you first start with Institute Literature in your classroom, you're not going to jump into every assessment and every report. But as you use it throughout the year and you become more comfortable, those modules are a great place to go to expand that knowledge that you have. All right, does anybody have any questions about assessments before we move on to the next piece, which is getting started in your classroom? Okay, wonderful. Thank you.